to you by Construction Management and BIM Plus. This session is entitled Information Management, When Will We Learn? In association with Ideagen Mail Manager. Our programme today, Paul Shillcock, Operam Academy MD and author of Information Management Standards, will challenge the construction industry's typical approach to adopting new ways of working and offer, based on his extensive global experience, what he believes is a better approach for organisations to drive transformation throughout their business. Then Ideagen Mail Manager will focus on an often neglected part of information management, email management. There will be a Q&A session after the speakers have concluded their presentations. Let me introduce our speakers. As I mentioned, Paul Shillcock, MD of Operam Academy, I'll get my teeth in eventually, and author of ISO 19650-2 and a co-author of PAS 1192-2 and PD 19650. And Hugh Knipe, Senior Account Manager at Ideagen Mail Manager. I'm Justin Stanton, Editor of BIM Plus. I'm your chair this afternoon. First, we've got some housekeeping. If you've done several of these before, you'll be used to these. Please use the Q&A function, not the chat function. Please use the Q&A function to ask questions of the speakers. The panel will answer those questions in the Q&A session at the end. You can ask questions as yourself or anonymously. The webinar is being recorded and will be available to watch on demand via the original registration link later today. There's 1 hour's CPD credit for those who complete this webinar live. CPD certificates will be issued a couple of hours after the webinar has finished. So that's enough of that. Paul, it's over to you if you want to turn your camera and mic on and share your screen.
Okay, thanks, Justin. Let me just share my screen. Okay, are we all good?
Yep, perfect. Over to you.
Awesome. Right, so good afternoon, everybody. So as you might be aware, the standards relating to the management of information in the construction industry have been around for probably well over 15 years now, and most recently in the form of the ISO 19650 series. And whilst there's some really good examples of what good looks like, on the most part, we're still pretty poor when it comes to managing information. And so why is that? Why is it as an industry, as governments, as companies, as projects, as teams, as individuals, we still haven't quite learned how to manage information effectively? Now, I believe that if we don't learn to manage information effectively, then we can forget about your BIM, we can forget about your digital twins and your golden threads, we can forget about the lot of it, all right? Because it's just not going to happen. So the theme of my talk today is about how can we learn to manage information more effectively. And I'm so passionate about this that I've even used this as a call to action, as a strap line for my own company. So I'm going to share some of my thoughts about where I believe we're going wrong and how I believe that we can start to learn to manage information more effectively. But before I do, just to build on what Justin's introduction. So my name's Paul, which you already know. I'm the founder and director of Operam. So there are two sides to the business. On the one side, we help organizations align their business processes with the latest industry standards and best practice. And on the other side, we help organizations to build the capability and capacity that they need to manage information effectively. And that's where Operam Academy comes in. I'm also a member of the BSI committee responsible for developing both national and international standards for the management of information. And as Justin mentioned, I've been the author of a few of the standards, notably ISO 19650 Part 2. At the moment, we're also looking at undertaking a review of Parts 1, 2, and potentially Part 3. And that's ongoing. That's probably going to keep us busy for most of this year. I'm also an international ambassador for NEMA. So for those of you who aren't aware of what NEMA is, it's basically the new identity for what was the UK BIM Alliance. And as an international ambassador, My role is to promote the UK BIM framework around the world and the NEMA resources that support it. So if you haven't done so already, I strongly recommend that you try and take a look at the NEMA website. Just go into Google and search We Are NEMA and you'll find it there. And finally, in my spare time, I enjoy training and competing in endurance events, mainly triathlon. Okay, so what is the problem with standards? Why don't people like standards, and why are people getting so frustrated with them? Well, probably the story starts in 2007 when BS 1192 was published. That was based around the collaborative production of information, and still published. A lot of that content has found its way into the ISO 19650 series. We then had PAS 1192 Part 2, which became the framework document for what was called BIM Level 2 in the UK. That was for the delivery phase. Part 3 was then published around the information management process for the operational phase. We then had Part 4 looking at the exchange of that information between the different parties. Part 5 looking at the adopting what we call security-minded approach to the management of information. And then Part 6 looking at how we can introduce health and safety information into the information model. They then got sort of sidelined and elevated to international levels. So we had parts 1 and 2, looking at the concepts and principles and the delivery phase. We then had the transition guidance from 1192 to 19650. Parts 3 and then part 5 were then published, looking at the operational and the security aspects of built assets, so keeping in line with 1192. Not forgetting part 4, which is eventually published, looking at the exchange of information. And basically, the story goes on in terms of the plethora of standards that are associated and referenced directly within the information management process. And so, you know, it's no surprise that people do get so frustrated with them. Even somebody who's, this is my job, this is what I've built a business around, trying to keep on top of the developments, both at a national, at a regional level in terms of Europe, and at a global level. It's pretty much a full-time job. And so to expect the people who are meant to adopt those standards to do the same is probably unrealistic. But if you're finding yourself in that situation, then my advice would be to at least start with the ISO 19650 series as it is today. All right. So currently there are 5 parts. You'll be pleased to know that there is a 6th part in development. So we've actually got a review meeting on that next week, and that hopefully will be published later on in the year. But as at the moment, there are the 5 parts. Part 1, as I mentioned, is took the concepts and principles for both the delivery and operational phase and put them in nice and neat into a single standard. So if you're new to information management, this is definitely your starting point. Parts 2, clearly obviously one of the best parts of the 5, looks at the management of information during the delivery phase of assets. All right, so defines the information management process and the activities within it. Part 3, which is actually the prequel to Part 2, looks at the information management process during the operational phase. All right, that's not just after the ribbon gets cut. All right, it's starting at the front and then working throughout the delivery phase and beyond. Part 4, as I mentioned, looks in terms of the exchange of information and how the different parties work and communicate with each other. And then Part 5 looks at the security of built assets. So this is not information security per se. There's a whole other series of standards called ISO 27000, which looks at that. This is around the security of built assets. All right. Now it's up for the asset owner to decide which part or all of their assets are deemed to be sensitive and what additional measures may need to be put in place. So that is the ISO 19650 series in a nutshell. As I say, if you're new, this should be your starting point. But as in terms of an industry, a lot of people just get et up around the standards, and you'll hear people saying ISO 19650 does this and says this, and we've got to do this. I actually think it's probably a time that we stopped thinking about information management as a series of standards. All right. Where we need to get to is that we're starting to think of information management as a business process. All right. And like any business process, it's simply a set of interrelated activities that convert inputs into outputs to achieve an intended result. All right. And in terms of information management, you could argue that intended result is simply for the right people to get the right information at the right time. Now, in terms of the information management process as it's defined, there are 8 steps within the process. All right. Within each step, there are a series of activities. Some need to be done as a series because the input is dependent on the output of the preceding activity. But some of the activities can be done in parallel, and they're the ones that you can see stacked up. And basically, within each step, what you'll see is there are activities. Each step builds on from the previous step, and each activity builds on from the previous activity, all right, till we get to the end. So when you lay it all out, okay, it does look like a linear process. It also looks like very similar to a project management process. However, it is very different, okay? And the reason why it's different is because steps 2 to 7 have to be repeated for each and every appointment, all right? So this is actually what the information management process looks like, all right? So for each appointment that is made either during a delivery or operational phase, right, steps 2 to 7 are repeated. Now, when it comes to implementing this, I think one of the most biggest important lessons is that information management is a team sport. All right, it cannot be done by a single company, by a team, or by a single project, or by a single individual. All parties need to work collaboratively in both the management and the production of information. And this is especially important during the upstream activities where the requirements for information are being established and a detailed planning is taking place. So if you want all the spoils that come with managing information effectively, like your 3D, your 4D, your 5D, or your virtual reality, augmented reality, your digital twins, your golden thread, or even artificial intelligence, then all parties need to work together as a team. Right? If you're not, then everyone's going to be left disappointed. Right? I can certainly assure you of that. And to build on this analogy, all right, so in this scenario, the team manager is the client, right, or appointing party as referred to in ISO 19650. Their role is to produce information. It's not to produce information. That's the role of the teams out on the pitch. Their role is to provide the right collaborative and commercial environment for the team to work together like a well-oiled machine, all right, and to be crystal clear on what they want and what they need from that team, all right, just like in any sport. If not, then everyone in the team will just be making it up as they go along. And for those of you who don't follow football, this is a picture from the Champions League final in 2005, where a unusually average Liverpool side faced an AC Milan side full of international superstars. AC Milan were 3-0 up at half-time, but individual heroes will only get you so far, all right? And that's true in real life. And basically what happened is the average Liverpool side went on to win the game because they had a manager who empowered the team to perform, and they worked together as a team, not as 11 silos like AC Milan did. Okay, so that's in terms of the standards and where we're at and what you should be thinking of them as an information management process. But how do you then embed that within your organization? Well, in my experience, it tends to be along these lines. A lot of organizations are asking themselves still, are we going to do BIM or are we not going to do BIM? Is this going to be a BIM project? Is this not going to be a BIM project? I'll be honest, I've got no idea what a BIM project is, all right? So for me, the real question is, do we want to manage information on this project effectively or do we not, all right? That is simply the question. Now, to explain what most organizations do in terms of their approach, I'm going to use the typical people, process, and technology method, but I'm also going to add on leadership and implementation. So, as I say, in terms of my experience, what I tend to see with a lot of organizations is that they will be looking to respond to external demands, all right? And it's literally this morning, I had a conversation with a public sector body, authority, who have now been told there's some mandate that in the next 2 to 3 years, they need to be doing BIM, all right? So there's external demands on the organization. So of course, for a leadership team, the answer is, okay, let's do BIM. Now, at this point, a lot of the technology vendors who are very good at selling things that you never realized that you thought you needed, right, are only too happy to help sell their wares to help you to implement this thing called BIM. So a lot of organizations will then go out and spend a lot of money on those enabling technologies. If they're lucky, they might look to develop some information standards to support that, so that the exchange of information can be effective, but predominantly within their own little team. They're not thinking beyond their team and exchanging information with the clients or exchanging information with other teams. Again, if you're lucky, the organization will invest in some training, but at this point, the project's likely to have already started. People are already behind, and there's literally no time to actually undertake that training. So what happens is that you end up with a series of delays, conflicts, and unbudgeted costs on that particular appointment. Okay. Now, at this point, what we tend to see is that everybody now gets really annoyed. Okay, but those external demands are still there. All of a sudden, it is now BIM's fault why that appointment went so bad and so much money was lost. So as a knee-jerk reaction, it's right, that's it. Let's not do BIM, because that is the root of all evil. But you're still left with all the enabling technologies that you've invested in, and all those delays, conflicts, and costs aren't going to go away. All right. So this gets everybody annoyed, not just the organization themselves who are footing their bill, the individuals who worked on the appointment, their partners, and ultimately the client. All right. There are no winners in this approach. Now, if this looks familiar in your own organization, then you may want to start thinking about whether that's an organization that you actually want to stay in. All right, because it's not the normal approach to how you actually drive transformation. And so the question is there actually a better approach? So again, I'm going to use the same model, people, process, technology, with the addition of leadership and implementation. I think the big difference with organizations who implement new ways of working successfully is that it is driven by internal business goals. So these are the organizations who see the value in adopting new ways of working and managing information effectively for their own organization. All right, it's not an external demand that is being put on them. All right, they've realized the value. There's a value proposition within their own organization. Off the back of that, they have a strong leadership who are developing the right strategies and resource plans to implement those strategies and effective policies. All right. So, for example, they might have a model first policy, or a policy where everybody must complete some training before they access to the common data environment, or whatever it might be. All right. So the leadership there in terms of demonstrating the right behaviors and putting the right things in place for the organization to transform. So I'm going to assume that nearly all of you on the call have worked on an appointment where information needs to be managed. And the reason why that's a safe bet is because every appointment you have to manage some sort of information. I'm also going to assume that a few of you may have worked on appointments where information was managed really well. All right, and I really hope that is the case. But I suspect that most of you have worked on appointments where information wasn't managed really well. In fact, it was managed really badly. All right. Now, whether your experience is good or bad doesn't make any difference. All right. The thing is that you hold knowledge in your head that's really valuable for your organization in terms of what works and what doesn't work. And this needs to be the starting point. All right. Harness the knowledge within the organization. From there, you can then start to align your business processes with the latest industry standards and best practice. As I say, your starting point for that should be the ISO 19650 series. From that, you can then determine the functional and non-functional requirements for the enabling technology to support the implementation of that business process. Okay, once you've got a clear set of requirements, you can then undertake a gap analysis of your existing enabling technologies, because the chances are the vast majority of those requirements will already be met. But if not, you'll have a clear set of requirements to go out and procure the enabling technologies to support and enable the business processes. From there, it's about understanding what the most effective standards, methods, and procedures are for each of the activities within the business process. All right, and they will vary depending on the type of appointment, type of asset that you're actually working on. Okay, so you're likely to have multiple standards, methods, and procedures for a given appointment. From there, Okay, it's then back to people, and this is where the education and training comes in. So education in terms of the information management process, who needs to do what, when they need to do it, and how they need to do it, and the skills-based training in terms of the software and enabling technologies that they need to be able to produce the information. From there, we're into implementation, right? And this is key. This is where you need to start to capture the learning from that. It's unlikely that's going to go well first time. It's unlikely, even if it does go well, that the next one doesn't guarantee that the next one's going to go well. All right. Once you capture that learning, it's vital that learning comes back in to the organization. All right. And building on that existing knowledge. And this is how we learn to manage information effectively. All right. By aligning with the industry standards and best practice where appropriate, and learning what works for your business each time you implement that process. Okay, and if you capture that learning, then you'll enter into a state of continuous improvement. Now, when it comes to adopting this type of approach, the two questions I get asked the most are, one, how long will it take? And two, how much will it cost? All right, now this is an impossible question to answer, all right, obviously for every organization, but I would answer it in this way. Whatever time and money you spend or have spent on enabling technologies, you should be spending an equal amount on the people and the process. All right, and this is where a lot of organizations fail. They'll put all their money into the technology, but neglect the people and the process that the technology is there to enable. All right, and if you don't do that, then you're only wasting your time, because nothing will change, and you'll just end up with this a lot of expensive technology that isn't adding any value to your business. Okay, I think my time is about up. Hopefully that's will provoke a few questions later on. But apart from that, thank you for listening.
Paul, thank you very much. That might be the first time we've had a Liverpool versus AC Milan reference in one of our webinars. Let's see how the audience react to that one. If you can stop sharing your screen, and move towards the back of the virtual stage, and Hugh, if you're ready to share your screen, over to you.
Great, thank you, Justin. Thank you, Paul. That was really kind of insightful, and I definitely kind of learned a few things. Not being a football fan, that football reference went straight over my head. So as a bit of a kind of a recap, as mentioned earlier, my name is Hugh Knipe, and I work with businesses globally, mainly in the architecture, engineering, and construction sector, to help them unify their project information. So to move straight into the presentation, as was touched upon previously, the technology landscape globally is changing at an ever-increasing speed, and that's no different within the AEC industries. I'm sure that you've all noticed in your own work, technology is continuing to rapidly evolve and drive the AEC to become safer, cheaper, and quicker. Today, there are numerous examples of how new technology is revolutionizing the sector, which kind of include artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and BIM. It's no surprise that with everything going on in the world right now, and teams either working remotely or in a hybrid working environment, that it's becoming more and more difficult to access project information. Professionals like yourselves rely on strong, consistent communication. This might take the form of pitches, winning clients, and day-to-day communication with your colleagues. The days are gone, or at least limited, where you can turn around to the desk next to you and ask your colleague to help you find an email, for example. What this means for a lot of people is that they don't have access to the information they need, and they are left out of the communication loop. As you can imagine, this is a huge problem. With over 347 billion emails sent and received every day in 2023, email is the most used communication and collaboration tool across the world. But it's the one thing most people manage differently, creating huge risks for the future. One of these risks comes in the form of project rework. A recent study found that 80% of project professionals spend half of their time on rework, and this poor communication costs $62 million every year on average. Rework doesn't just waste your time and money, but can cause huge communication breakdowns within your team and with your senior executives and stakeholders. So here at Mail Manager, we run an annual survey called the State of AEC Project Management Research Report, which aims to discover the project management and collaboration challenges facing businesses globally. The report explores how firms manage project information, where they store it, and how they go about retrieving data when facing legal disputes. So let's jump into the main findings of the 2023 report. Firstly, the majority of firms cannot easily access their project information. We found that only 10% of respondents were not concerned about the accessibility and visibility of their project information. So most see this as a big challenge. Secondly, over a quarter of organizations are at risk when staff leave the business. Our research showed that more firms are aware of the importance of filing emails as part of the offboarding process when people leave the business than last year. And this is demonstrated by in 2022, less than half of respondents indicated that employees were required to file all project-related emails into a central location. And this year, that number had risen to 58%, which is obviously great to see. But unfortunately, 28% still do not require emails to be filed, and so this information is lost. Thirdly, disputes are continuing to rise year on year. In our 2021 report, 63% of respondents experienced some form of dispute in the business, and this year that number has risen to a disturbing 91%. Project scope changes and payments continue to be the leading cause of these disputes. Considering the majority of project scope information resides in emails and formal documents, and firms cannot easily access these, it's hardly surprising that they are continuing to dig themselves into trouble. And finally, as we touched upon, email is still the most used communication and collaboration tool in the industry. For the session today, we'll be focusing on the disputes angle of the research, but we'll be emailing everyone a copy of the full research report in the next few days. So in the AEC, we're seeing trends where costs are on the rise, margins are tighter than ever, and there are large staff cutbacks. Even larger global firms have reported huge drop-offs in profit as their staff costs are increasing. With so much uncertainty and so many people leaving businesses, there's a strong need for organizations to think about their information management. How can you be sure that you have access to all documents and correspondence as staff are to leave the business? Considering 28% of businesses do not have email filing as part of their offboarding processes, and 81% of firms use email for the majority of their project correspondence, thousands of firms are at great risk of losing information. Even more concerning is the finding that 55% of those surveyed indicated that they do not have any email management systems in place. I'm sure everyone on the webinar today has heard or read that email is dead. But at least in the AEC, these claims are inaccurate. In 2023, 88% of survey respondents indicated that their overall volume of email has increased in the last 12 months. This is a stark increase from the year before, and the contents of these emails are more important than ever, with 11% of people claiming it is now business critical. On top of this, almost 2/3 of businesses regularly need to retrieve emails from past projects, with only 2% never having the need. Over the last 3 years of this research report, these numbers have remained consistent. Many can relate to not always needing to refer to previous emails. However, only 1 to 2% never need to. For many firms, emails and keeping them well organized and accessible is not a consideration until things go wrong. And as we can see, they hold vital information that could mean the difference between winning and losing a dispute. So unfortunately, we're seeing that project costs are continuing to spiral, which has led to an increase in disputes within the AEC. Our research found that only 9% of people surveyed have not experienced a dispute in the last 12 months. 63% of organizations reported experiencing a dispute in the business in 2021. This number rose to 78% in 2022, and as we mentioned more recently, 91% in 23. The top 2 causes were issues related to project scope changes and chasing payments. Unfortunately for the industry, issues relating to project scope are continuing to gain momentum. Why? It's because the majority, 85% of information relating to scope changes are stored in email and formal documents. To break this down further, 12% of project scope changes do not reside in a digital space at all. And shockingly, 11% of respondents highlighted that the only place they are kept is in the project manager's head. In 2022, pre-COVID, this was 6.2%, which shows an alarming increase of AEC firms not formally recording project scope changes in the past 3 years. With findings like these, it's hardly surprising that 90% of businesses are concerned about their project information not being readily accessible or available. We're consistently seeing that failing to make emails visible and accessible to project teams can cause issues that result in a legal dispute. According to Arcadis' 2022 Global Construction Disputes Report, the global average value of disputes was $52.6 million US, with an average length of over 15 months. Firms cannot afford to let information like email correspondence slip through the cracks. We've seen this leaky bucket of email negatively affecting AEC firms globally recently. Firms must be aware of their corporate history and be able to prove everything that has happened on projects, especially as stakes are so high. Given the nature of the industry we all operate in, firms need to guarantee information visibility to ensure they are making the right decisions. In the best cases, poor information management costs firms money, but in the worst, it makes people unsafe. Given the size of the global disputes environment, the cost of mismanaging emails is immense and includes information being locked in individuals' inboxes, staff wasting time looking for information they need to do their job, and also staff leaving the business or going away on holiday, but a range of important information is left trapped in their inbox. With proper email management processes in place, businesses can ensure that all project information and correspondence is captured and accessible by entire project teams. This will reduce the risk of rework and stop project disputes in their track. Plus, you'll have this information to hand years down the line should a liability dispute arise. So this has just been a quick overview of our 2023 State of the AEC report. As I mentioned, we'll send out the full report in the next few days. So to be more precise, what does this mean for information management and how can it help you avoid disputes going forward? Luckily for us, technology advancements are continuing to improve how we work. As I touched on earlier, firms are increasingly using tech to boost efficiencies. And as was mentioned, BIM advancements means that team members ideally can all be on the same page. The use of BIM has seen several benefits, including reducing waste, improving collaboration, enhancing productivity, time savings on projects, and being a way to increase overall technology adoption in the AEC. It's improving safety across the industry and provides deep insights into buildings as well. So while all this new tech and standards like ISO 19650 are making our lives easier and really boosting the industry, we have access to a massive amount of data, both inside and outside of our organizations, that make information management difficult. This sensitive and often confidential information is typically stored in documents and correspondence, and it can often be quite inaccessible, stored in disparate applications by various departments or even different offices. Information is the lifeblood of all project work, but only if it's well organized, accessible, secure, and updated. And this is no easy task. But what's the solution? You need a single place where all your project and client information are stored, so you can see the complete picture of any given project you're working on. You would need a single source of truth, which is also known as the golden thread of information. And it's a concept based around bringing all information together, ensuring everyone in an organization has access to everything they need before making any business decisions. This single source of truth provides better working methods and encourages more transparent communication. This is helping organizations drive change faster without compromising quality, and ensures that all project and client teams have access to the correct information they need when they need it. Managing project information in one place is critical to avoiding disputes, and when done right, allows teams to use their time, resources, and knowledge to make the right decisions at the right time. The two easiest ways to create this are by removing manual processes of information sharing and increasing information visibility across the board. So one thing to keep in mind is that if your single source of truth is not fully complete, it's not the truth. What we've seen in our research report is that while firms are stringent about how their documents and contracts are managed, email is the one thing that everyone manages differently. Without the tools and automation in place, project teams are left to their own devices. Some people will move emails into other Outlook folders, some people save information to their individual desktops, and others simply delete information if they don't see a need for it any longer. In all of these scenarios, that information is trapped in silos and inaccessible to the wider project team. Losing access to essential emails or not including them in your overall information strategy can prove detrimental to firms. When emails are managed correctly, everyone in an organization has access to the information they need to make the right decisions at the right time. It provides a much better way of working, encourages more transparent communications, and ensures that all team members have access to that single source of truth. Plus, it removes the responsibility of storing and managing data from one person or a single department. So it's time to avoid these common email headaches which are listed on screen. Questioning that this isn't what we agreed. Having to ask the client, when did you tell us this? Having to kind of sheepishly go to a client to say, John has left the company, so can you recap on this because I'm coming to this cold? Questioning that they never sent us this. Chasing a colleague that you need XYZ information before the meeting, or just having to ask them to forward you that email because you can't find it yourself. And some of the benefits of centralizing your information include that your data becomes more discoverable. It allows you to eliminate some of the human error because you're automating the workflows. You're able to better establish version control. You reduce the amount of time wasted on searching or recreating lost documents. You increase transparency and traceability of work. And you're able to more easily comply with regulatory and legal requirements. And that's where Mail Manager comes in. So who are we and why are we talking to you all today? So I'm sure everyone on this call has heard or even worked with Arup at one point. For those who haven't, Arup are a global consultancy firm who have worked on and designed projects such as the Sydney Opera House and more recently helped work on the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. So Arup built Mail Manager around 20 years ago internally, the reason being that they had no control over how their staff managed their emails. Yes, there were processes in place. They tried public folders, project email addresses, manually dragging and dropping to the server, but all of these processes relied on the individual to remember to do it and also decide on what is and what isn't important, which, as you can imagine, didn't always happen. So the two main issues that Arup had were firstly, that project teams didn't have up-to-date information on their projects, especially if they were new on a project or someone else had left the team. Another big issue was risk, as Arup had to retain their data for up to 14 years after a project had finished in case of any claims or litigation. There's always a chance that we'd be able to kind of go back and find that data, but it would be so time-consuming to do so. So Arup wanted to find a system that would allow project teams to be able to find any email across the project within a few clicks. But we had to take away the time spent filing, and most importantly, the reliance on the individual to do so. If users had to start dragging and dropping or tagging emails, it wouldn't work. People wouldn't follow that process as they would like. They needed something they could turn on overnight that would just start learning behaviors and would mean that they wouldn't have to discuss email management again. They couldn't find anything that let them do this, so they decided to write their own system. And now we're talking with a number of our clients about how mail managers help their email processes. And we tend to hear a couple of things pop up regularly. For Gensler, the key benefits of using Mail Manager are that they're able to save up to 5 hours per week per person by removing the requirement for printing, file coding, and hard copy filing of emails. And they're more easily able to comply with QA and statutory standards. Ramble, they noted that Mail Manager means that important project information is now accessible to the whole wider team, even when people are on holiday or leave the business. They are confident in the fact that they have access to all their information down the line, and it is now less time intensive to file their emails. So staff can focus on value-adding work that is work that they more enjoy. So Mail Manager has allowed Ramble to save approximately 3 hours per user per week, and this is especially true for project members and managers, as they're able to improve efficiency and productivity across their projects. For WSP, better email management processes means that they have been able to retrieve project information in seconds. They find greater business efficiency as they can spend more time on real work and greater visibility by capturing both sides of their conversations. The 3 of those customer stories you've heard tie back to the 4 key issues we hear from businesses we talk to that are ultimately the reason they want to purchase an email management solution like Mail Manager. Firstly, they're generally concerned about the consequences they may face if they were able to lose any project information or correspondence. Secondly, their team spend countless hours every week searching for information contained in emails, or they're wasting time on administration, like manually filing away those emails. They're also concerned that they lack control over the communication that is going out and coming into the business. And finally, information is trapped in individuals' inboxes, making it effectively unusable. So with Mail Manager, we look to give our customers confidence that any email that's been filed can be retrieved. Businesses can find any email in seconds, which is going to increase productivity across the firm. And finally, you'll have one central space for all your project information, helping you create and maintain that single source of truth. So what I'll go into now is I'll come out of the presentation and I'll show you how we look to ensure emails are filed across the business. So the biggest changes that you would see is you can file your incoming emails, but if I send a new email or if I reply to this email from Cam, I'll say, thank you, looks good. And as soon as I click send on this email, I receive a prompt. And this prompt is how we help ensure the emails end up in the right folders and that emails are going to be filed as part of that single source of truth. So the prompt comes up and it uses machine learning to be able to predict where this email needs to go to. So the end user isn't having to do any thinking on their own. Mail Manager looks at where you've previously filed emails from this person, but it can also look at the content of the email, so the subject line and the body of the text, to compare this email to other emails that have also been filed. And when I click send and file, this is going to file both sides of the communication. So you're going to be able to see what has been sent and received, what goes in and out of the business by looking at our central store of information. So that's one small part of our product. If you are interested in seeing more, please do reach out at the end of the demonstration and we'd be happy to arrange a further demonstration. But that's everything from me. I think I'll hand back over to Justin.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's jump into the Q&A. So I can see that Paul's already been answering some of them by text, but I'll ask them out loud and get him to answer them out loud so everyone can hear. The first question for you, Paul, was what are the most common errors or areas of confusion that your clients flag to you?
Yeah, so I think if you think back to the diagram where you had the people, process, and technology, it's that leadership and implementation. It is that leadership element that tends to be the biggest issue. It's certainly a common theme in almost every organization that we've worked with, in the sense that the leadership team just don't get it, in terms of they don't see the value proposition of managing information. They feel it's an IT problem, or it can be solved by IT. That's not related to their business or their business model. It is very much a risk-based issue, and as the leadership team responsible for running the company, they should. This is their one weapon that could actually help them to manage that business risk. And if you haven't got that, and they're not demonstrating the right behaviours, then it's a bit of a thankless task as somebody trying to, introduce new ways of working and align business processes, because you're just pushing war up the hill basically.
How do you turn that situation around?
Well, the first thing is you need a good sponsor. In fact, when we work with organisations, we're quite fortunate in that we're able to sort of be a little bit selective. And the first thing that I look for is having the right sponsor, somebody with the authority and understands the problems and understands what needs to be done. So if you haven't got that, there's actually no point in engaging us to support. So getting the right sponsor is probably my main advice for that.
Okay. The next one was, what's the kind of people training needed? Is this software specific or more general training in information management principles?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to vary for every organisation, but as I said in my response, 75% of the activities in the information management process are upstream before we even put pen to paper. And if you look at all the different activities that you've got in terms of the requirements, you've got contracts, you've got procurement, legal, you've got detailed planning, you've got scheduling, you've got resourcing, you've got cost. All of those. Once you've got your business process, then and the activities within it, basically you then assign responsibility for those activities, and they're the people that need to be educated in order to undertake that activity effectively. And then in terms of the people who are producing the information, it's likely that they will need some skills-based software training, because they're probably the ones going to be using the tools. So we do sort of separate education and training in that sense. But even up in the upstream activities, there may actually be some enabling technologies to support that process. So that could be, there's software for requirements management, there's software for procurement teams, and so on. So they don't need to be educated on the process, the inputs, the outputs that are needed, but then they may actually need some training to use the enabling technologies to support that as well.
Okay, perfect. Do asset commissioning clients have different information management issues compared to contractors and the rest of the supply chain?
Yeah, and I think just purely on the basis of the process itself. So there are 8 steps. Steps 1 and 2 are solely for what we refer to as the appointing party. And so just that alone means that they have a number of challenges in order to undertake those activities effectively. Now, it's important that they do that, because if they don't, then it's unlikely the subsequent activities or steps can be implemented effectively. As you get further down, the appointing part becomes less involved, and it's more the delivery teams that are on it. And I wouldn't really sort of divide. I think the issues are common across all delivery teams, because they're all facing the same challenges. So yeah, in answer to the direct question, I would say yes, just purely on the basis of the activities are so different.
Okay, well, we'll give you one last question, then we'll throw some over to Hugh, give you a rest. Your slide showing the evolution of all the information management standards probably sums up why there's been confusion and fatigue. Since the original BIM mandate was introduced, have we managed to complicate something that shouldn't be that complex?
Yeah, I mean, it's not the first time I've heard that sort of comment, and I think I haven't been involved in the development of these standards, trying to find something that is going to be suitable for every type of asset, every type of project, every type of procurement route in every country, in every sector, is actually quite difficult. And so. And in terms of trying to have a framework upon which different people want to hang different standards and so on, so it does sort of tend to grow legs and arms. But this is why what I'm trying to say is not everybody in the organization needs to know about the standards, all right? You only need at least one, maybe a handful of people who they know about the standards and what they do and so on, but also have a good understanding of the business. They're the ones who can bring that together and develop a business process that suits your business, all right? And then everything else is just noise, all right? And then you focus in on your business process, knowing that it's aligned where appropriate to those standards, all right? So that's probably the best way to take out that complexity.
Yeah. Okay. All right. A couple of questions for Hugh then. So Marina Damaschio asks, how do you file email? Is it by subject title that's important?
Yeah, great question. So as I showed with the prompt, there's a number of different things that kind of go into the recommendations. It's based off what's in the subject title, also what's in the body of the text, and also where you filed emails from that person in the past, and all those kind of go in and kind of make that recommendation. So I think I've seen other people comment about, what if people mistitle emails? What if it's not kind of clear what the email is about? Mail Manager doesn't just base it off subject lines, because as we know, two different companies might be working on the same project but be calling it different things. So their project numbers and names are going to be different. So Mail Manager makes a recommendation after looking at all those different criteria.
So, and then, so yes, related to that then, so Cyril Kemavor asks, what happens if you file the email in a wrong folder?
Yep. So with Mail Manager, it might be worth kind of having a demonstration, because there's more parts of the product. There's a search functionality and there's all sorts of different other tools. The quick answer is, if you notice straight away, we can show you your filing history and you can kind of go in and move it. If you're in our search function and you notice it's in the wrong folder, you can right click and move it. So it's not going to the wrong place forever. You can change where the destination folder is.
Okay. Does Mail Manager, quote unquote, read documents attached to an email?
So we recognize that documents are attached, and we'll never can strip those documents out. We'd store them as part of the message file on your server, within your SharePoint, wherever you're looking to store your documents. And then using our search tool, you can then search for any emails with documents and the name of those documents, the type of those documents, to easily retrieve them as well.
What happens with sensitive or confidential emails?
Yep, great question. So Mail Manager doesn't have any security settings ourselves. We mirror the security settings of your system. So I'm sure every company have areas of their document management system that are partitioned off, so only certain people have access to them. So for example, not everyone in the company would have access to the HR drive, the IT drive, the finance drive. So Mail Manager will just mirror those permissions, so that you're only ever going to be able to see the emails within the folders that you have access to.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We'll jump back to Paul for a question or two. Scott Pritchard says, hi, Paul. Thank you for the presentation. So refreshing to hear. One of the biggest hurdles I have encountered in implementing BIM, and more importantly, making the move towards information management, is getting people to acknowledge that BIM is not a 3D and CDE solution. Do you have any tips on how to get people to stop simplifying BIM/information management?
Well, if I knew that, we'd all be a lot further along. I think, yeah, I think the first thing, and it's a little bit contentious, is to stop using the term BIM. So, it's something that certainly in the UK we've been sort of mindful of and slowly sort of trying to work it out. And interestingly, a lot of the comments on the review for the ISO have included trying to drop the term BIM, even around things like the BIM execution plan, because it doesn't actually reflect what the document is. And so, yeah, I recognise that people's association with the term is around either the software or the geometrical models. And so, yeah, so probably I guess the easiest thing would be to stop using that term, or accept that's what people are going to think of. And so there is more of a move towards information management. We're seeing that, whether that's getting rid of the UK BIM Alliance and making that in terms of NEMA, Do you know what I mean? So it is more focused on information management, and what we're trying to do is to elevate information management to be alongside the other management functions within an organization. So whether that's project management, design management, construction management, asset management, commercial management. All right, so you have these sort of management functions, and I think the other thing is, as well as that, when you actually get to that level, so each function should have its own management system, which sets out the business processes and plans and policies and so on. So that gives it a credibility as well. I think the other thing is having typically in an organization, there would be somebody who would head up that management function within the business. So there would be a head of project management, a head of design management. And so what you're really looking for is a head, whatever you're going to call them, head of the information management function, and they need to have a seat at the table along with the other heads. So it gains recognition of equal status of the other management functions within the business. Quite often we sort of see BIM and information management as like sort of like sub little team hidden away in the corner, either, and then people are confused. Do they sit in IT? Do you mean, or do they sit in the business? For me, it's a very strong, they sit in the business along with the other management functions. So I think, yeah, it's a difficult nut to crack. We haven't got the budget, the energy, or even the will, to be honest, because if I waste another minute trying to explain to somebody what BIM is or isn't, I don't know, I'll probably throw myself out the window. But yeah, I think, organizations, it comes back to this leadership thing. Organizations need to include it as a management function within their hierarchy.
Okay, all right. Jump back to Hugh for a question or two. So Mike Dean is citing an example of, say, I want to search the email database for the mention of a specific part in the BIM model, but the email I need doesn't reference the BIM database value. So he's asking, I think then appends to that. My question is, how do I search something that's not referenced?
Yeah, great question. So through Mail Manager, our search functionality goes through all the different areas of the email, so the subject line, the body of the text, and the fact that there's a document attached and things like that. What you can also do is, if the email complete doesn't mention anything that you'll kind of need to kind of search on it in the future, you're able to kind of add comments, add categories that just add additional metadata to the email to make it easier to search and find that email in the future.
Okay. One I don't think we've seen before, towards the bottom of the Q&A box. With the email management system, does it work only on live emails? Can historic emails be fed into it?
Yeah, great question. So the prompt we probably recommend to only use on new emails, fresh emails coming into the business. But we do recognize that one of the true values of our system is the search functionality. So we have built ways that you can upload your historic emails into Mail Manager, so they become searchable, discoverable by our search functionality.
Okay. Just trawling through the other questions. Just we've got a minute or two left. We all experience this. What happens with duplicate emails?
Yep. So because the email will be going to the same place no matter how many people are filing it, Mail Manager can recognize it's the same email by the metadata, and only one copy of that email will be retained within the central document management system. Okay.
And we've referenced complexity within standards, but what's the induction or the training involved when implementing Mail Manager? Some email users are not as organized, or dare we say, as competent as others.
Yeah, great question. And so many companies I speak to think they've got the worst, the worst employees, the ones that are the least technology competent. As hopefully you could see through the demonstration, Mail Manager pops up, so it's habit forming straight away. So people can't really avoid using the system. But we do have training sessions that 30 minutes, 45 minutes, where we run everyone through it, explain how to use the system, potential best practices. And in terms of those potential users that you have concerns about, we can actually report back on usage. So after 3 months, after 6 months, we can say, X number of users haven't fired any emails, they probably need to have that reinforcement session to make sure that their information is not going to be lost, and it's going to form part of the company's management process.
Okay, all righty. Conscious of time, perhaps just throw a final question at Paul, possibly slightly open. Who will be responsible and or will be implementing, or probably who should be responsible for or implementing information management? The client, the project manager, the contractor, etc. Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute, Paul.
Dan, I was doing so well too. Yeah, so ultimately, from a process point of view, it is the client. All right, if they're responsible for steps 1 and 2, you can't start the process in the middle. All right, you have to start at the beginning. So from the process point of view, it's the client. From an organizational point of view, it is whoever is accountable for risk in your organization. They're the ones who should be looking at information management.
Yeah. Okay. All righty. Just final one for Hugh, because I think it's we know the answer to this. I now can't find the question, of course. Is Mail Manager available for free? Is it part of Outlook?
It is part of Outlook, so it's an add-in to Outlook, but unfortunately we offer a free trial, so you can kind of use it for free for 2 weeks, but then we'd be more than happy to provide a quotation for your business. Feel free to kind of reach out to me afterwards and we can arrange a call to go through that.
Brilliant. Okay, conscious of the time, so we need to move towards the end game. So I'll reshare my screen and move to the final, attempt to move to the final slide, if it'll allow me to do so. It doesn't want me to do so, does it? Let's try that again. There we go. So this webinar, to remind you all, has been recorded and will be available on demand a little later today. For more on Operam Academy, go to operamacademy.com. For more on Ideagen Mail Manager, go to mailmanager.com. Our next webinars are part of the Global Construction Summit. You can find out more about those and register for those at globalconstructionreview.com/global-construction-summit. Simply remains for me to say thank you to Ideagen Mail Manager for supporting this webinar, and thank you very much to Paul and to Hugh for your time and insight this afternoon. And thank you, the audience, for tuning in. Good afternoon.